Rockfin. Oh shit! Why am I not signed into Rockfin? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Killjoy Guide, the Left Feminist podcast for the 99%. I am your host, Killjoy Meg, and with me I have my FHL co-host and the host of the Sabby Sabs show, Sabrina Salvati. Welcome to the show, Sabby.
The Meganator.
You know that it's funny, that used to be my Twitter handle. Meganator 1000. Ready to terminate the patriarchy. Yeah, we should have Bess from Millennial coming in soon. I don't know where she is. All right, she's coming now. She'll be here in a minute. All right, so today on the show, we're going to kind of just have a discussion about looking at the intersections of, being a millennial and being, feminist women, and what that really means to us, how we got to this point, what were... Oh, here comes Bess. Hey, Bess.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Sorry, always late.
It's good to have you, girl.
How's it going today, guys?
Here.
Oh, ice cream day.
Yeah, things are pretty good. Like, we got a little fiery today, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I'm a little fired up today, I'm not gonna lie.
Me too, let's do it.
All right, so let's just start right off the bat. I'm really curious about, since we're all millennials, we're all feminists, like, what are the things that really radicalized you and got you not only into politics, but kind of got your, brought out your more feminist side? Like, what were the things that radicalized you? Let's start with Sabby.
Please.
Well, I think it started like when I was an undergrad. I went to University of South Carolina, and one of the things that was really funny to me was that so many people were like, there was like this push that you were supposed to get married, you were supposed to find someone. Keep in mind, I was only like 20. And so oftentimes I was faced with, if I wasn't dating someone or didn't have a boyfriend, then the question would be like, oh, you better hurry up. You better hurry up. And I remember thinking to myself, like, hurry up and do what? And so it was just really interesting to me because like down there, like there was this sentiment that you're supposed to get married really young, and, start a family really young. And my mindset was not that way. Like I was more, focused on career, like starting my career at least, and thinking about those things later on. But I didn't feel like I had to rush to find a guy to marry. But that seemed to be the sentiment there. So that is kind of what, like, I guess pushed me more towards being like a feminist. And then when I would say, like, when I turned like 25, that was when I started to get the questions of, you're not married? Oh, do you like girls? And I'm like, well, no, I like guys. People are allowed to be single. And I think that kind of like radicalized me in a way. The fact that I was 25 at that point and I wasn't married and I didn't have kids down there, for whatever reason, just seemed to be like this taboo thing. And I don't live there anymore. I'm in Boston area, but that really like pushed me. And I started thinking to myself, like, is this what people think? Do people think that women, this is our goal in life, is that we're supposed to find a husband? So that kind of led me down this path, I think.
All right, Bess, let's move on to you. Like, what are some of the things that radicalized you, particularly as millennial and as a feminist?
Sure. Well, actually, I was always a feminist. My parents were boomers. They were hippies, and my parents raised me to be feminist, both my mom and my dad, which was awesome and a really cool experience, except for the fact that the bubble popped when I had tried to get a job, right? So, yeah, I mean, I had a weird experience. I had okay, so my mother passed away when I was in college. I was a sophomore in college, and my family, actually, we had found out after the fact, but my uncle was my mom's brother. He had actually been embezzling money from our family for like years, and we didn't know about that. Like, you know, papers were forged, like the whole fucking, like, it was definitely a crime. So I'm sorry, cursing, no cursing, no cursing.
Go ahead. Let it out.
Oh, it's good. Okay. So I, you know, like, you know, after my mom passed, I started finding out all this stuff because I, you know, like, I wasn't the executor of her estate, but the executor of her estate like sued them. And you know, we found out that they kept doing, like, you know, they kept taking stuff like before lawyers could get there to find out how much, you know, things are worth and whatever. And they were like secretly selling stuff on the side, and like we would come, you know, to a property and find it cleaned out, like stuff like that. So anyway, so yeah, and like almost immediately after my mom died, I mean, I never was I wouldn't say super close with these people to begin with, but they were the only family I really knew too well, you know. And so anyway, so after my mom died, I got a call from my cousin Matt, who said to me, don't speak to me or my family ever again, because we were trying to like argue for our part of the money. And then later on, like, I kept hearing, you know, the words, you know, the men get the money in this family. That was always the justification. And I had heard that growing up too. And my mother had heard that. The men get the money in this family. The men get the money in this family. To the point where, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, it turned out to be like a 10-year battle, and like all of the money got eaten up by lawyers. And it's like the Charles Dickens book, like Bleak House, if you've ever read it. But yeah, it's exactly like that, because the lawyers just eat it all up, and it, you know, it's like never something I got my hands on. So whatever. But yeah, I mean, the men get everything in this family was told to me by men in my family and by women in my family as well. So like that started, you know, that started a serious journey that only intensified after my dad passed away, and I started taking care of my grandpa, who had dementia. And he was like just too young to go to World War II. So he fought in Korea. And he just had that mentality, you know, that, I don't know, the silent generation, I guess, like he was a young silent generation. So, you know, he got to a point where it was so terrible, I had to move in with him to take care of him. And that radicalized the F out of me, let me tell you. Because, you know, I'm not only is this guy have dementia, so like that's part of the problem, but the other part of the problem is that I'm a woman, and he's used to treating women like his secretary or his wife. And that's exactly, you know, I felt like he was constantly telling me what to do. I couldn't get a minute's peace. He was verbally abusive. He, like, you know, I mean, you know, and a lot of, you know, some of my trauma comes from the dementia, but he really had this view of women that I should be, you know, taking care of him. But yeah, So, you know, after that, like, I got pretty hardcore feminist after that. I definitely became like a rage outlet for me. So, you know, ever since then, I just, you know, I've always been, like I said, I've always been some sort of a feminist. I started out in theater. And hey, what's up, JB? You know, I always hated the fact that when I was younger, I played the mom parts because I was fat. And then I got out into the real world and realized, oh, I can't get any parts because I'm not old enough to be a mom. So there's that. And then there would be times where I'd realize that I got jobs because like my boobs were out. There are times like that. There are times where, you know, I would just start seeing it. It like builds, right? Over time, you just see it more and more and more and more. So yeah, I mean, I definitely saw it a lot while I was dating. You know, I mean, I could go on, but I won't.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. And I mean, my experiences are definitely, you know, a bit of a mix of a lot of that. Because I mean, from a very young age, like I was always told, because I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and my sister and I were always we were very sheltered growing up, very sheltered. Like, and we were often not allowed to do a lot of the things that my brothers were allowed to do. And one of the big reasons was, my mom always say, like, this is basically the only sex ed I ever got growing up, was girls get pregnant and boys don't. So it's like, no, it's not that we don't trust you girls, it's that we don't trust the boys. You know, we don't trust the boys out in the world. So no, you're not allowed to do anything. And partially I understood where she was coming from because my aunt was a teen mom. So I understood where she was coming from, but I also felt that it was very restrictive. And then that continued to happen, you know, when I was in high school, and, you know, we weren't given sex ed in high school either. And my high school boyfriend ended up coercing me into something I wasn't ready for and ended up sexually assaulting me. So again, just like all those different things. And then it was finally around 2014. Like I was a feminist like through college, but I didn't really identify as a feminist. Even though I did take a couple classes in like issues in feminism, I learned a little bit about intersectionality, and I took a class on women in politics, but I didn't really identify really that much with the feminist movement, even though like the fact that I had been discriminated against like upset me and annoyed me. And I saw that more as I got into the workforce and was being sexually harassed at work. But then 2014 came around, and the Santa Barbara shooting happened. So, and you know that the incel who shot up was killing women at the University of Santa Barbara, and the hashtag for Yes All Women came out, and like it finally hit me. Oh, this is not just a personal thing. This is something that is happening to women all over the place. Like having like my brother's girlfriend have to teach me in college, like, no, you need to have your keys out. That way you can use them as a weapon whenever you're walking to your car at night. You need to, like, boys are the predators and girls are the prey. So let boys come and pursue you. You don't pursue the boys. So like these little itty bitty, like little microaggressions and lessons that I was being told throughout my young adult life. And finally it's just like, you know what? I don't think, like, it didn't really occur to me that these were all problems that I was not the only one facing. And so, like, I had always kind of had that leaning in me, but then 2014 happened, and it like really took over. Have you guys had any like really big events that that you came across? Like, Sabby, I'll start with you. That really got you going, no, you know what? This is something that this is real. Like, we need to really start, and we can even talk about, you know, moving into the idea of being not only feminists, but millennials, and the things that radicalized us to move more to the left, too, because we're not just feminists, we're also hardcore leftists. So what are some of the things that are kind of at the intersection there? Sabby, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I know one of the things that really struck me as odd was at one point in time, I went to this church, and it was a Pentecostal church. And I left that church, and you're about to find out why. But they had
Sorry,
these
I'm gonna cut
rules.
you off for just 1 second because I need to address this. Joe, there are lots of feminists who are feminine. Hello, look at us. We are feminine. Just because you may not think that we're feminine doesn't mean that we're not. Okay? We decide what our femininity looks like. All right? I mean, look at my friend Bess here. She's wearing lipstick. She's got earrings on. Sabby has a nice shirt. She's got her hair curled. She's got nice bangs. We decide what's
Look
feminine,
at those
not you.
bangs.
We decide what's feminine, not you. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sabby.
Yeah. So yeah, so like they had all these rules, and I started asking questions, and apparently I realized very soon they didn't want you to really ask questions. And some of the rules that they had were, it was like the women weren't allowed to wear pants, but the guys, it was like, it seemed like to me most of the rules tend to apply to the women instead of the men. So like the women couldn't wear pants, we weren't allowed to wear makeup, we weren't allowed to wear jewelry, we weren't supposed to cut our hair. And I asked a question one night in Bible study, and I was like, so what rules apply to the men? And everybody just turned and looked at me, and they're like, well, women are supposed to be submissive to their husbands. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not married. So what? It just didn't make sense to me. So like what I saw is like the guys because they didn't have the dress code restrictions. So like the guys would go and play basketball, and like obviously you're wearing a dress or a skirt, it's gonna be hard for you to like play basketball. They would like they could go go to football games and stuff like that. They were allowed to watch sports on TV, but we were told as like women, like we weren't supposed to watch like, stuff like the Housewives or whatever. Then it got to the point where they were just like, well, TV's just bad, so you shouldn't watch it. But it was okay for the guys to do it. And so I started asking these questions, and they were just like, well, you shouldn't bring negativity to Bible study or to church. And I was like, how is it negativity if I'm just asking a question? And am I the only one that notices that the rules tend to apply to the women but not to the men? And then it got even more worse, to the point where they were like, you shouldn't go to college is a bad thing. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to like, start a family. And like, that is your role as a woman. And so I asked the question one night again, and I said, okay, so what happens if a female can't have kids? And again, everybody just turned and just looked at me and was just like, oh, well, that would never happen to a Christian woman. I was like, really?
Oh, goodness.
So it just made me realize, and other people end up leaving too over as time went by. I think they started to see this as well, but it just made me realize how easily, even in this day and age, that these old school like rules that we've had like in our society are still passable, and how people can still easily believe them and not ask any questions. And when people say things like, well, how do these women end up in these cults? It can easily happen if you have no other outside influence, or no one else telling you otherwise, or you're told you're not allowed to watch TV, you can't research things, you can only read things that are religious. So that keeps information from you. And I didn't like that. And that really like just pushed me to be like, no, like all of the women in here, all of you, if you want to, you should be able to go to college. If you want to work, you should be able to work. Who are they to tell you what your role is as a woman, while the men get to do whatever they want?
Yeah, absolutely. Bess, go ahead.
Yeah, 100% to everything you said. I mean, and like you wanna ask why do women get caught up in these cults or whatever? The DNC is a cult. The GOP is a cult. There are cults everywhere, man. I don't personally believe in organized religion because I believe a lot of them are cults. I mean, some of them are good. Some of them do really good in the community and stuff. I'm not trying to be anti-religious, but like, I mean, it's really easy to find a cult around here. They're like, you could get into like a Dungeons and Dragons ring and find yourself in a cult all of a sudden. Like, like there's always somewhere, people will flock to a leader, right? So, anyway, what was the other point I was going to make? I feel like, yes, I feel like, it's, I went to a bachelor's and then I got my master's degree, and I feel like the like I was prepped for, during those scholastic experiences to, go out and get a job in the world. Like, it'll be easy if you just, make a connection or go to this conference or whatever, this blah, blah, blah. And like, when I got out in the real world, it turned out that nobody wanted me to be smart because I was a woman. Nobody wanted me to be opinionated. Nobody wanted me to be, better than the guys that I was competing with. Hello. So, it's just like, on some level, I feel like the previous generations have concentrated on, and it makes sense because this is the areas in which, women are generally employed, right? But like, women have focused on the children, raising the children, doing the schooling, and making sure that, women are competitive in the market and stuff like that. But when it comes to the market itself, nobody has done anything. It's gotten worse, I would imagine, over the since 2008. And I graduated college in 2007 for my bachelor's degree. Oh, so thanks a lot. I just graduated, right into a shrinking market where you had to have 10, years of experience to get an entry-level job. And I saw that everywhere all the time. I mean, and on top of which, not only was I a woman, I was a fat woman. And I was a fat woman who was apologetic about being fat. And that does me a disservice all the time. I told you a story on my show, Meg, where, I applied to get into a secretary firm for, lawyers and doctors and stuff like that. And just based on their view of my back sitting, like, they decided not to speak with me. Like, they saw my ass in the window and they were like, nope, bye, next. So, I mean, like, we're not, it's not different than Mad Men, right? Like, you talk to a lot of, older women and they're like, oh, well, we made all of these. Yes, absolutely. The market is a patriarchal construct. But, like, you talk to all these older women and they're like, oh, we marched and we burned our bras. We made all these strides for you. Like, aren't you grateful? Like, aren't you happy? Like, and the same thing, could be said, and I'll wrap it up quickly, but, the same thing could be said about, the sort of presumption that, Western feminism is better than, feminism in Afghanistan you guys were talking about earlier. Like, it's just, no. Just because things look better to you doesn't mean they're actually physically better for us, right? So anyway, yeah, I won't go on forever. Go ahead.
Yeah. So another good example here from Just JC. Like, years ago, I had a meeting with one of my ex-bosses and asked how I could move up in the company. He looked at me confused and said, what do you mean? You are a clerk. I said, how can I advance? And like, how do you continue? He said, I don't understand the question. You are a clerk already. Like how does she get a promotion? Like, that's what's so crazy too about, like, just the way that you go up in different jobs. Like, this was definitely a big problem in the 60s. Like women who were secretaries at like newspapers could never become journalists. They could never become reporters. They could only ever be secretaries until they finally sued, and they were able to sue for those promotions. And that just goes to show that has not gone away even to this day. Like, that women are more likely to work in lower paid jobs. This is still a reality. Either they're paid less than men and whatever for equal work, or they are also, most women, particularly women of color, are in lower income jobs. A lot of it is service work. And a lot of those low income or part-time or whatever jobs don't come with benefits. So this is really bad for women when they cannot advance. Although, of course, being a socialist, like, I don't like CEOs. I don't like corner offices. I think all those should go away. We should have worker ownership. That's just me. But at least I do still believe that women should have power in the workplace, and the fact that we're still not seen as being able to advance in our jobs is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's even frowned upon for us to, look to ask for a raise or ask for a promotion. Like, a lot of women are scared to do that because we are looked down on it for it. We're looked down on for having ambition. And it's been shown that, even with the wage gap, the wage gap not only increases if you are a woman of color, but also increases with age and how many children you have. Men tend to get a raise for every child that they have, whereas women's pay goes down for every child that they have. How much bullshit is that? How much bullshit is that? Like, so just JC again, like, I had a BA and 10 years of experience. That's insane, JC. That is insane. I hope that you switch jobs, because that company did not deserve you. But I want to pick up on something that Bess said about the promises of,
Before
if
you move on, can I really quickly butt in for a second?
Yeah.
The wage gap statistics actually are not, like, they're always presented as it's like equal work, equal pay, comparing apples to apples. But that's not the case. Actually, it's, the majority of women, the average is dragged down by how many women work in low paying areas. And the way they like to phrase it is women choose to work in low paying areas. The way, we should really be seeing it is that they choose to pay women less in women focused areas, right? So anyway, I just wanted to pop that in there.
Right, and that's true, because there was an article that came out about pink collar jobs. And what it showed was, even in jobs that are mainly female dominated, if men go into those jobs, whether it's, nursing, radiology, men still tend to get paid more in those areas than women do. And whenever women enter a male dominated field, those values tend to go down. So whenever women enter the workforce in different areas, men will always be paid more. It is kind of ridiculous when you really think about it. But it is true, though, exactly what you said, that, women are much more likely to be in low income work, even care work. We do not value care work at all. And women tend to be the caretakers of children, of the elderly, of their husbands, boyfriends, whoever. Like, women tend to be the caretaker more. So that's what's normally called the double shift. So you have a shift at work, but then you have to go home and you have another shift of taking care of the household. And that hasn't changed, because men, you got to step up. You got to start taking care of some of these household duties. All right. You have to step up. We have to have some equal. If we're going to have equality in the workplace, we have to have equality in the home as well, because otherwise you're just having more unpaid labor being done by women. That labor needs to be done by you too.
Yeah.
Any points on that before we move to?
Yeah, there's something I want to add to that that I just remembered. Every time I'm at the mall, and I don't know why that's at the mall, but every time I'm at the mall and I see a husband and wife with their kids, this is usually, the kids are younger, still small enough to put in a stroller. It seems like, to me, I noticed that you have the husband just strolling along. He might be carrying the bag. Sometimes he's carrying nothing, but the woman is always left with the kids. And I've noticed that. Like, just go to the mall one day, guys, and just sit down and just, like, people watch. That is something I noticed. Like, the woman is the one with the stroller and the kids, and the husband is just, like, just trucking along with nothing. Like, guys, you can help out too. And it's something I noticed. I know more men are starting to, choose to help with that, but it's still very much a woman's role that I see doing that still till this day.
Yes, Greg, you got to put the dishes away. You got to help Sabby out over here. You got to help her out, man. Put those dishes away. Vacuum the house every now and again. Interesting. Let me see what this says. Eagles. It also affects It also affects me as a man because it's promoted that men cannot be soft or family oriented. Absolutely. It's shameful that this is the main mindset. We don't or won't stay at home in the child rearing. Absolutely, because there is, this is one of the stereotypes from patriarchy. And this is why patriarchy is just as bad for men as it is for women. Because men are expected to be strong and to protect the household, to go out and get money and food for the family. And you cannot be soft. You can don't be a girl. Don't cry like a little girl. Man up. Like, this is bad for men as well, because you are then not expected to take on a lot of these roles. You're not expected to be nurturers. And men can absolutely be nurturing. Men can absolutely be nurturing. So you're absolutely right that it is ridiculous that under patriarchy, we treat men as if they're just cold, heartless, must go off and must make money. It's complete and utter bullshit. Let me see. My ex-girlfriend was on in-home caregiver, and when she got the job and thought it would pay well, it was like, yep. That unfortunately is a very real thing. Like, caregivers are not paid what they should be. You're very lucky, Narissa. Not all men are like that. You're very lucky. I'm glad your husband is so wonderful. Congratulations. You got a good one.
I'm an in-home caregiver, and that is extremely low for my area. That's really hard to hear. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Another one. Yes, this is also a stereotype that women are bad drivers. Like, not true. Women are excellent drivers. Yeah. Also true. The patriarchal ideology within capitalism is toxic to families and men having early attachment with their children. Yep. 100%. 100%. Because that's the thing that people don't quite understand too, is that capitalism is patriarchy. So if we're not taking down capitalism, we're not taking down patriarchy. And this is one of the reasons I don't like liberal feminism, because liberal feminism is about women rising through the ranks and gaining power within the existing capitalist structure. So if they're gaining power in the existing capitalist structure, then they are gaining power in the patriarchal structure. And they're becoming equal opportunity oppressors. So this is why I don't like liberal feminism. This is why I'm a socialist. So kind of going off of that, Bess made a point before about, particularly looking for jobs and coming of age. Like, we all came up in the 90s. We were all born in the 80s and came up through the 90s. And during this time of the 90s, this was a period that certain scholars like Rosalind Gill call post-feminism, which is basically like the backlash period where feminism was still in the water and was still part of the ethos of neoliberalism, but they were able to make it so that it was more of a girl power feminism and an individualist feminism, because it was still existing under capitalism. So we saw women rising through the ranks, becoming CEOs, becoming Supreme Court justices. See, we're making so many strides for women, and yet you saw a lot of, the welfare state, a lot of the safety nets that protected women being stripped away, like welfare. And what was the one for children that was, I know that like TARP, was gone. And different, we just kept on having them taken away. We got the crime bill. We had Reaganomics. We had all these different things. So in the media, we had women rising through the ranks. We had women CEOs. We had women executives. Yay, women. Cutting all the safety nets for women, making it harder. And it's just all this backlash toward feminism, but we still had like this kind of girl power, but then also if women did rise in the ranks, they were kind of cold bitches. So we love women. Women are bitches. Like, it's it was such a kind of a mind fuck, if I can say that. But there was still this kind of ethos that, you know, because of feminism, because of what they were able to do in the 60s and the 70s, feminism is over. We don't need it anymore. Women now have equality. And if you just work hard, ladies, then you can have everything. You can have it all. You know, the Sex and the City ethos. You can have it all. You can be living in the big city with a big power job. You can have the apartment. You can be having sex with all the men that you want. You can have sex like a man. But then we came of age, and we came of age just as the war in Iraq was happening. So a lot of the first millennials were coming of age just as the war in Iraq was happening and were being sent off to war. A lot of us were graduating from college just as the financial crisis happened. And because they wanted so much unpaid labor, you couldn't get a job unless you had 50 internships underneath your belt. It has 5 years experience for an entry-level job. Even though we had all these years of education, because no, you got to go to college. You have to go to college in order to make something of yourself. So take out all these student loans. That way you can go to the best school you can, you get the best education you can. And we come out, nobody will hire us because, one, we're in a financial crisis, and because we don't have 5 years of experience because we just graduated college. And even if we do get a job, wait, you want benefits? No, you have to do the grunt work first. Like, what do you think? You spoiled rotten millennials. You spoiled rotten millennials thinking that you deserve something from your work. Even though you put in all these years of education to get the right job, to get the right credentials to get that job. So these are all the promises that Bess kind of got to. We were promised growing up, if we did all the work, that we would benefit from it. That was a promise that was made to us, that we could have it all. And then, lo and behold, it was all bullshit. All right, so Bess, I'm going to start with you this time. What was your experience coming of age and learning that this was all just bullshit?
Yeah, well said. Everything you just said, absolutely. I mean, what was my experience coming of age? It was pretty terrible. You know,
and also kind of growing up in the 90s too. Like, what were the things that you experienced in the 90s that you were like, oh yeah, I can do all these things?
Right.
And you realize that's false.
Right. Well, you had that, right? Like, you had that, like, lean in feminism. You had that, like, Clintonian, like, you know, you can literally have it all. And I'm picturing, it. Never mind. There was a year in which they had the Oscars and they had a big, like, kick line number at the end of one of the scenes, and they literally said, "Women can have it all." It was just like, oh my God. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's a lie. It's a lie. You can't have it all, because the reality is, right? Like, if you want to talk about how, you know, capitalism, specifically Western capitalism, is built by the patriarchy, right? Like, that means that it doesn't account for all of the labor that is traditionally feminine, right? Mm-hmm. So all of the work that women have to do when they get home from their job, right? All of that work is, you know, just expected to take, you know, to be done for you. And the people who are lucky enough to have that kind of structure do better in capitalism. There are some women that have that kind of structure and they do better in capitalism. But, you know, there are a lot of men. Yes. Yeah, totally. Exactly. And, you know, like, just because one or two women broke the glass ceiling doesn't mean it's different for the rest of us. And it doesn't mean that, you know, we get treated fairly on the job. I mean, like, one time I had a boss who, like, came up to me and he was intentionally giving me a hard time because he was annoyed that I'm smart. right? Like he was just like, oh, who does she think she is, you know, and like started giving me a hard time. Like I get that sometimes. And so he literally, like, I talked back to him one day, and he literally said, like, I'm not you know, anti feminist. Like, you know, my wife grew up in the 60s, and like she really had to go through some terrible things, and like you're lucky that you're dealing with me. And it's like, I mean, like, yeah, I'm glad you're not slapping my ass, but at the same time, like, I had a guy who sat next to me, like we had a divider between us, but he got caught looking at porn on his computer, okay? And he did not get fired for it. He just got moved next to me so that everyone could see what was on his computer at all times. That was the only punishment that he was given. Meanwhile, you know, we had people being fired because they had, you know, had to take time off for illnesses. Like that's, and they were women. Those are the people who were fired. And I think I was probably one of them, honestly, because I had my back surgery during that point, and I had to take a lot of time off for that. And then I had to take days off afterwards as well to, you know, just to recover. So, you know, that was one of the reasons that they were looking to fire me. And then at the first opportunity they did, you know? So, like these inequities are still palpable. And like, you know, at that job too, it was really a crazy experience. Number one, they asked me whether I was married or not in my interview. That's illegal. Number two, I heard a conversation, because my boss was like the head of HR, and she had a conversation completely out open in the hallway with somebody who had just had a baby. And hey, Misty, what's up? And she literally said to him, "Congratulations on having your baby. Welcome back to work. You get a raise." What? I've never heard a woman, you know, receive a raise for having a baby. No, she always gets time. You know, she always gets degraded at work for having a baby, or fired, or, you know, has to take time off and then they fire her or something, you know, like how ridiculous. Even at that job, there was another woman who was pregnant at that job, and she had to work through ridiculous hours during her pregnancy. She worked like 10-12 hour days sometimes, and she had to come in on weekends and everything. And she barely took any time off to have her baby. Barely took any time off. She didn't get a raise. You know, so this stuff happens. This stuff happens everywhere. So anyway, I mean, you know, we were sold a liberal dream that Aaron Sorkin, I think, painted a very pretty picture of.
30s is millennial. We're all there in our 30s,
yes.
Chris. We're all millennials.
Yes. You used to
Gen
be a
Z
millennial.
is early 20s.
Right. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely. I could keep ranting, but if you want to move on, that's cool.
Sabby, what do you have to say? What was it like growing up in the 90s, as in that post-feminist era, and kind of realizing, coming of age and realizing, oh, you know what, this is all total bullshit.
Oh my God. So it was weird because during that time we had the Spice Girls. And the Spice Girls,
girl power.
they were all about like girl power, and they were telling you, like, you know, they had that song where they were just like, if you want to be with me, you know, you got to get with my friends. Like, they were just like basically telling guys, like, look, this is how it's going to be. And yet at the same time, like, I went to college like years later, and I had a professor in I took broadcast journalism. So I had a professor that taught broadcast.
Great song, Casey.
Class.
Great song.
And yeah, same thing. And he was also a news anchor, a local news anchor. And he told one of the girls in my class, and I'll never forget this. There was only like 15 people in the class. And we had to go around the room and say like what we wanted to do, like in media. When it got to her, like, she said that she wanted to start off as like a reporter, and then she eventually wanted to be a lead anchor, which is usually the path that you would go, right? He told her in front of the whole class, well, not to disappoint you, but you don't have the looks for that. Maybe you should do production. And I honestly felt like my heart just like skipped a beat because everybody, all of us in the class were just kind of like side-eyeing each other, like, what the hell? You know what I mean? But we all knew why he said that to her. And the reason why he said that to her is because she was overweight. And it was such a slap in the face. And it really pissed me. I remember I was just like, did he really just say that? Like, I feel like that's not something you should say to the class, or to anybody, period, in that environment. And then on top of that, that entire semester, I just felt incredibly bad for her because every time we came to class, she was always just trying to prove him wrong, that she deserved to be there. And he constantly beat her up, constantly beat her up. And it was just like he bullied her the whole semester. It was like he was trying to get her to quit. And the rest of us in the class, we just felt incredibly bad for her that whole semester. And I remember thinking to myself, even then, it was like, even going back to the Spice Girls before I went to college, the Spice Girls had a certain look. And so those women that look like that, yeah, they could tell guys, I'll tell you what I want and this is how it's going to be. But for people like the girl who was in my class, she couldn't even tell you what she wanted to do for her career without getting like bullied and beat down and humiliated in front of the entire classroom. And I think for me, that's when I really realized that how media was, how production can be, like how like just the news, the media, like all in general, but also how men who are in a position of power, how they can take that power and just humiliate you. And you have two options. You can either sit there and fight against it, which is what she did, or you can get up and you can walk away. But either way, in that particular situation, she still lost because when you choose to fight against it, you're going to get bullied, you're going to get beat up, they're going to come after you even harder. I mean, look at what they did to Tara Reid. So, and if you choose to walk away, then it's like people don't get to hear your voice, they don't get to hear your story, and then you'll have people tell you, well, you should have said something, like, why didn't you fight or whatever. And so it is very, very unfortunate. Someone mentioned in the chat, Britney Spears is a prime example of how the culture was in the 90s. And this is so true.
In the early 2000s.
Oh yeah. You look back and it's different now. But if you go watch like those music videos, like from the 90s, if you were a female, it was like this thing that you had to show your midriff. Like that was like a thing. And like Britney Spears was like a teenager. And same thing with Christina Aguilera. These girls were so young. And this is what they were told to do. This is how they were objectified. Even Jessica Simpson came out against this years later and said they told her she had to dress this way and she didn't feel comfortable doing it. So you never see them do this with men. And so it's that idea that like in order for you to be successful as a woman or to go anywhere and to get anywhere, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It's based on what you look like.
Right. And that's absolutely true. Like women are valued much more for their appearance, their sexiness, because sexiness makes you more sexually available to men. Although of course you can't be too sexual. You must be prudish yet slutty. Like is that double bind that we hear all about. Like you can't be bossy, but you must be assertive. You can't be too fat, but you can't be fat, but you also can't be too thin. You can't be too prudish, but you can't be too slutty. You can't be too submissive, but you can't be too aggressive. And it's just this constant double bind that kind of closes in on you over and over and over again. And it's absolutely 100% true. Because even with Britney Spears, she had to be, the sexy Lolita, but also be the girl next door. Because she had to appeal to the men, but also to young girls. So she had to be both and really play up both of that. Like laying on a Rolling Stone cover with her shirt wide open, showing her bra, being sexy, yet holding a Teletubby. Like, is both like a sexualization of her, but also an infantilization of her. Because, that sexy schoolgirl, like, that jailbait. That jailbait, sexy the Lolita, the American Lolita. And that's the role she had to play. Like Christina Aguilera, she was allowed to be a little bit more sexy, especially later on, you know, during her Moulin Rouge days. Like she was allowed to be sexy because she was known as, she was the bad girl. You know, Britney Spears was the all-American Miss American Pie, sweet girl next door. Christina was, you know, this sexy kind of seductress, and she was able to do that. And then, of course, Jessica Simpson was more conservative, later the Daisy Duke wearing girl. So they all had to play their roles. And of course, we all saw, you know, the big, how they pitted Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera against each other. Even though, like, there was no reason to pit them against one another at all. None. It was just all about, you know, we have to increase sales. So, oh, Britney Spears has got something. So, Team Britney, you got to go out there. Team Christina. Because you need a good girl, you need a bad girl. And we see that even now with, like, Kate Middleton and Meghan Markle. You know, Kate is, you know, the feature queen, very prim. And then, of course, you have the dangerous, modern Black woman who's going to make Kate cry. Like, you have to pit women against each other. And we don't need to be pitted against each other. Not at all.
And can I add something to that, Meg?
Yeah,
about the
go
90s?
ahead.
So, you picked the 90s as, like, my favorite, like, decade. But,
oh, we all grew up in the 90s. We're all 90s girls.
It's like, this is why people like, musicians like Alanis Morissette were so important.
I love her.
Exactly, because she didn't dress like that and she didn't have to. She still sold albums. Like at one point, Alanis Morissette was like best selling like album, whatever. You know what I mean? Like she didn't care like what she wore. She didn't care about those things. And like she had songs that were very like angst. And so people like that, I remember like, you know, growing up, I remember my dad was like, I don't understand. Why does everybody like this song?
Because she was different. She broke the mold. She said what we were all thinking. Yeah. Like, I didn't come into Alanis Morissette until I was in high school, which was like, I graduated in 2006. So I didn't come into her until I was in high school. But like, I was like, yes, this is my jam. Because she is
the perfect high school jam. Perfect high school jam.
Yes. She was that angst. You just felt it. It was kind of the same with like No Doubt and a lot of that that kind of more grungy punk, that Riot Girl feeling that, you know, someone mentioned Riot Girl not too long ago. Like they expressed feelings. They were a subculture. So we had like that surface level girl power, but then we had that subculture of like, let's really dive into, you know, the meat of what is actually happening. So you had that Riot Girl subculture that was also existing, like the Fiona Apples and, you know, all that alternative rock that was really getting to the heart of structural sexism that was at the heart of what we were experiencing. But, you know, they were all still kind of niche. And Alanis Morissette was really the one who was able to break through.
Yep. That's so true. That's very true.
Yeah, so before you because Sabby needs to go in a few minutes. So before you go, Malik has a statistic here, and I wanted to talk about this and I'll bring up a couple polls that I was also reading. So I remember my first sociology class, the professor asked everyone to raise their hand if they identify as a feminist. Only 6 people out of 80 to 100 did. They all did once he gave the definition. And that's absolutely true. And that is still happening even right now. And I can bring up a couple of statistics. So let me just share my normal screen. That way I can show them both one after the other. So the first one, where is it? Don't you cry right now. I'm on the show. Sorry, my dog is like in the background crying at me. All right, so this first one came from Refinery 29 and CBS, and it was taken in 2018, right before the midterms. So it says that half of millennial women don't identify as feminists. Only about 48% of millennial women. Right, first off, I had to question the use of Leah here, who's a 22-year-old independent. 22-year-olds are not in 2018, she should be 25 now. She's not a millennial. She's Gen Z. So she should not have been included in this poll. She's an outlier. But she still makes excellent points about why women don't necessarily agree with being feminist. Because look here, 54% of young women said they're with Leah. They do not identify as feminist. And a lot of the reason that they said was that they could not identify with the feminist movement, particularly because it became too much about, some said it was too much about abortion. Some said that there was no need for it anymore. But there was one here that I thought was really, I thought that there was a lot here that she had to say. So let me see where she is. Melina, who is a 34-year-old Latina and Democrat. Feminism today focuses too much on nitpicking over the tiniest politically incorrect commentary and not enough on America's lack of family policies. She also believes that the current wave of feminism still overlooks issues that affect women of color. I find that feminists are typically white women, and I am not that, and therefore I do not feel included and cannot relate. As a woman of color, I deal with racism way more than any gender discrimination issues. She also said that her experience might explain why young white women are more likely to identify as feminists than women of color. There was also one. This person also said that I do consider myself for women's rights and equal rights. I don't want to seem anti-feminist. I'm anti-man bashing. If we lower ourselves as women just to say men can't do things, or they shouldn't, or the man should work harder for the same goals women have, they're basically saying that feminist movement has devolved from a movement that is about basically female superiority rather than male superiority. And this other one here, which I like the way that they kind of frame this as millennial women are sold, like we talked about, that promise of equality that society was not prepared to deliver. But they interviewed millennials in Cincinnati, Ohio, and both male and female. It showed that 89% are allies of women's rights, but only 67% self-identify as feminists, and 77%, even though they are allies with women's rights, 77% have a negative connotation with feminism. So very quickly, Sabby, before you have to go, what are some of your feelings about those polls, about why people still even millennial women tend not to identify as feminists?
Yeah, a lot of people think that feminists are women that hate men. I still hear people say that, then that's not true. But that's, pop culture has a lot to do with that. When you see movies and TV shows about feminists, that's usually the image that they project. The statement where the woman said because feminists are white women and she's not white, again, that's pop culture. That's usually what you see projected in the movies and TVs and as well. And it's I have to put, some of it is we have to research and we have to educate ourselves, do more research about it, and I put some of the responsibility on Hollywood. And Hollywood is notorious for doing that, for portraying things in such a way that is the stereotype and not what it actually is. And someone who brought this up recently, I saw this on a video. One of the original Black Panthers brought this up. She said she named all these movies that had scenes or that portrayed Black Panther Party. She said none of them were correct. And she mentioned, so she even mentioned the one that just came out recently with Judas and the Messiah. She pointed out, she said, first of all, as a Black Panther, you would never approach a person in leadership in that way. She said that would have never happened. So it's seeking out that information and looking that up on our own. We have to do more research on our own. But it's really easy. Like if you just watch these movies and TV shows, it's really easy to believe like that's how it is,
Yep, absolutely. Bess, how do you react to those polls saying that still even a majority of millennial women still don't identify as feminists?
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, you're definitely right, Sabby, that Hollywood has portrayed this, kind of like if you're a feminist, then you're automatically masculine, right? Well, what was that commenter earlier on
Mm-hmm.
that you had at school? Like we have focused really hard on becoming equals within a male construct that it's like we have you know equated equality with becoming masculine in some ways. And I personally don't support that. I'm very interested in feminine things, even though you may see me as a little bit masculine just because I'm confident. But I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. I also think that like white feminists have dominated the feminist talking space for a long time, and they have not properly represented the experiences of other races, and that is definitely what's pushing away, I think, a lot of women of color. But there's a myriad of reasons
So of
why
course
I
we
think
can't.
it's ugly. Yeah.
So of course we can't ignore the fact that the women's movement, even though there are obviously Black women in the feminist movement, like it has not been the most intersectional, and it's because there's been so much, particularly by the media, such a highlighting of the white leaders in feminist movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not okay, because there is some extremely interesting work done by Black feminists, by Asian feminists. I mean, you just got to look into it, and it's unfortunately not even going to be on your feminist class reading list. Like in schools, right? Higher education, there's a lot of feminist classes that are being taught with only white, books and articles. That's not okay. So, we need to, yes, the Gloria Steinem, and Gloria Steinem is awesome in her own way, but it's, like,
She does not represent the
she
feminist
does not
movement,
represent us. Absolutely. Absolutely.
particularly the feminist movement that we want to build, which is a feminism for the 99%.
Yes.
Like we have to get rid of this meritocratic. Stop crying at me. It's like dog mom problems, but
Intersectional.
but it's absolutely true that she was very much put in the way of the camera because she was a beautiful woman and she was white, and so she made feminism seem more appealing when everybody thought it was just like ugly women who were mad that they couldn't get a man. It's like, no, now you have this beautiful kind of 40 something single woman who, because she wasn't married, like, no, this is the type of woman we need to be putting at the forefront. And it was all about marketing. I can't, Matthew, I can say I have not read the Scum Manifesto. Okay, Sabby has to get going, but Bess is going to stick around. Sabby, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Mag. Next time I'll get to stay longer.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
Bye, guys.
Good to see you, Sabby.
Good to see you, too.
Yeah, maybe that'll be part. Like, if I start a book club, maybe we'll read the Scum Manifesto. I've definitely read a lot about. I've heard a lot about the Scum Manifesto, but I haven't had the opportunity to read it myself. But I mean, yeah, most of the feminism that I tend to read, like y'all know, I love me some bell hooks. Like bell hooks is someone that I read on a regular basis. Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, like these are a lot of the feminists that I tend to read because I feel like I learned so much more from Black feminists about how to be intersectional. The Combahee River collective statement is also a great piece. Anything by Kimberly Crenshaw. Although I do have criticisms of Kimberly Crenshaw, but I can save that for another episode. No, I haven't read Manifesta by Jen Baumgartner either, like that, but I will definitely put that on my reading list. And I actually have some reading recommendations for you guys too. So let me start. Let me actually bring up some of my reading recommendations. So if we're talking about 90s feminism, let's first start with, there's a book by Alison Yarrow, and the book is called 90s Bitch. And so 90s Bitch is basically all about, that dichotomy that I was talking about, that women in the media, particularly women who had power, were often portrayed as bitches. Like, we saw that a lot, even with Hillary Clinton, which we all have our criticisms of Hillary Clinton, but we can all acknowledge that she did face a lot of sexism, especially in the 90s. That doesn't make her a good person, but we can all acknowledge that. But sorry, I just got. But so 90s Bitch, let me bring up that cover, that way you guys can see it. I don't know if I can bring it up.
It's funny, like you mentioned that, because I kind of liked Hillary in 2016 because I thought she was a bitch. I thought she would be the best choice to defeat Trump, and I was the wrongest ever, clearly. But yeah, she kind of is, though. She kind of is a bitch, but not because society tells her. I mean, it's like that thing, right? Like, women are never supposed to speak up for themselves, and so anyone that speaks up is automatically considered a bitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, so here's that first book. It's called 90s Bitch: Media Culture and the Failed Promise of Gender Equality. Again, kind of talking about, and we can talk about why we didn't vote for Hillary in just a minute, because I think that's a good conversation about, what's different about millennial feminists versus other generations. So 90s Bitch: Media Culture and the Failed Promise of Gender Equality by Alison Yarrow. And let me go back and I'll quickly pull up the other one. As you can see, I have a lot of books in my Kindle. So many books in my Kindle. Right. a lot of them are just samples, because I can't afford books right now. All right, so then this one is also a good one. This one's a little bit more academic, but it's called Finding Feminism: Millennial Activists and the Unfinished Gender Revolution by Alison Crossley.
Ooh, I want to read that.
And it's a good research about understanding, particularly, like, a lot of academic feminists have questioned which wave of feminism we are in. As there's question of, whether we're in third wave feminism, because first wave, was when we were fighting for suffrage. The second wave was during the 60s and 70s, when we were fighting for, basically work equality and access to abortion, things like that. Third wave feminism tends to have started around the time of when intersectionality was coined. So, making feminism much more inclusive, much more intersectional, as I said, and really bringing new voices into feminist discourse. But now the question is, are we in a fourth wave of feminism? And that's one of the questions that she kind of looks at is, what's different about millennial feminists, particularly in our use of the internet to do consciousness raising, activism, and what was the other word I was looking for? It's like coalition building, because we do tend to spend a lot of time on the internet, because that's how we communicate. We came up during the time when social media especially was on the rise. Like, I graduated high school right when Facebook was taken off, back when it was still only for college kids. Remember that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, also the internet is the place that, we've learned to have like a space away from other generations, right? I mean, we have living on your parents' couch, right? Stereotypically, millennials are supposed to be doing that because we don't have the money to move out. And that's not weird in other countries, but okay, yeah, we're terrible humans for it. We need to be able to have a space that's our own, and a lot of people have difficulty finding that. Like, when I was younger, I remember, you know, like hanging out with people at like McDonald's parking lots. I remember like talking to people, you know, on Tumblr and stuff. Like, you know, like those, that's how you made friends, was online, right? Like, and it was easier to make friends around your interests online rather than dealing with the people that are around you who are usually terrible, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, I think that you know, we have a special relationship with the internet in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's definitely helped us to really, you know, connect with other feminists, and you know, through, you know, different means, like whether it was on Facebook or on Twitter, you know, being able to mobilize like the Women's March, you know, as problematic as, you know, the Women's March is,
Right.
we were able to mobilize that. We were able to build awareness on different situations with hashtags like Yes All Women, like Me Too, Why I Stayed, in different ones like that, like, you know, Why I Stayed, bringing much attention to women who are in interpersonal relationship violence, IPV, and domestic violence relationships, of why they stayed in those relationships and why we shouldn't shame them. And, you know, just all these different things, like even like things like, you know, Oscar So White, bringing attention to the fact that, you know, our media is very whitewashed. It doesn't center people of color, that, you know, they're just not getting the recognition. And we can definitely you know, we can definitely discuss that, but also kind of the limitations of just being on the internet. We can also acknowledge that as well, and how we need to have as much praxis and on the ground networking as we do online. We can absolutely acknowledge that we need to have an online offline mode of organizing and consciousness raising. We need to be consciousness raising in our localities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you know, I think a lot of unique activism is done online.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are you connecting with people that you wouldn't have before, but you're also spreading your message in a way that you wouldn't have before. Me Too is a perfect example of that, right? And I mean, that's a movement that you didn't need to know somebody to take part in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that says something huge too, because we traditionally, you know, women are separated from each other, right? From societal reasons. So yeah, like, you know, I always tend to defend, you know, people always like to crap on like Twitter activism and stuff, but I tend to defend it because honestly, you know, like there's accessibility issues when you go to on the ground actions, you know, like, and not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the time to do that. And the internet is always there. So even if you work like weird hours or whatever, and you get off at 3 a.m, then you can still go online and tweet about what you want to tweet. And, you know, I think that is valuable. And people have, you know, there's a lot of BS on Twitter. There's a lot of drama, you know, but I think
you're awesome. You are awesome, Lucky Burrito. That's so cool.
Nice. Yeah, like, you know, but I think there are a lot of good conversations that happen too. And just because, you know, things get personal and ugly doesn't necessarily mean that things don't happen from that, you know, eventually. So
yeah. No, 100%. As you said, it's definitely has a lot of, brings up a lot of questions about accessibility, particularly to activism and consciousness raising, because there are like people who can't, you know, go to marches. Like, this is a way for them to be active and to show their support and to have solidarity with us. And we should, like, if you are against, you know, just hashtag activism, you're kind of ableist, not gonna lie.
yeah, absolutely.
And,
like,
yeah, and also like one of the, like, I did a lot of research on hashtag activism and online organizing because of my master's degree. That was kind of my thesis. But one of the things too is that, you know, there are women in particularly, you know, areas like conservative areas, Muslim countries, other areas that, you know, maybe they don't have access to feminist literature. And so they go online and they can go to blogs and, you know, have conversations with other feminists and learn about what feminism is, and can then develop their own feminisms.
yeah.
So the internet
Or
is
if you can't afford
useful.
books. That's how I learned a
Yeah.
lot about stuff too. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so unfortunately we don't live in a society right now where the organizing on the ground is easy, where you can like create your feminist collective and pass out zines. I mean, there are amazing online organizations and also magazines. Like one that I actually want to talk to the creators of this new magazine that's starting out. It's called Lux, and it's a socialist feminist magazine. So look that up. I want to try to have the founders on my show. I need to get in touch with them. I think that'd be really awesome.
That is
Even
awesome.
like Bitch Media, was founded back in the '90s, and they're still doing good work. I mean, this magazine, even though they're a little bit more liberal, they do some good work too.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely love Bitch. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
There. But there are great resources, and if you don't have access to that easily, you can easily go online and have that access. So I do think that is something that our generation is bringing about, but also since we came of age in such an episteme of coming of age during a time of renewed sexism, the popular feminism and popular misogyny kind of really coalescing, seeing that popular misogyny being manifest in person through that guy shooting up a Planned Parenthood, or Elliot Rogers shooting up shooting up Santa Barbara, the University of Santa Barbara. Seeing this manifest and seeing so much of this terrorism too. Like whenever you see a school shoot or a shooter in a lot of places, what do you always find? That they were domestic abusers. Very often, people who hate women are the ones that are committing these atrocities. And we need to recognize that hatred of women, misogyny, is a gateway to a lot of this more terroristic behavior. Like usually if they hate women, they're going to hate other people.
Absolutely. And I think too, it's because men are encouraged not to have feelings, right? Like, I like to talk about the difference between male culture and female culture, because, they exactly, there have always been many genders, right? Like I believe in gender theory, like there have always been many genders, but society has, especially Western society, has never acknowledged that there were that many genders. So a culture, including gender roles, including, preferences, including mannerisms and behavior, ways of thinking, have become, genderized, essentially polarized. So the emotional life has been part of female culture for a long time, because men are never allowed to have emotions. They were never supposed to. It's supposed to be a weak thing. So if everything that you feel gets channeled into either anger or horniness, like it makes a lot of sense that you're going to shoot some places up, right? Like it's not healthy. And I think that honestly, maybe that is one of the features of millennial feminism, because I really do believe that millennial men and younger men in general, Kyle Rittenhouse does come to mind, and he is younger, unfortunately. But I think, at least, I think men in general are starting to understand that, emotions are okay, that, they can express themselves in different ways, and that it's okay to have an emotional conversation with a woman. It's okay to have an emotional conversation with your friends, and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that to a certain extent, men are definitely still expected to, man up. And even like some of the like don't be a bitch, don't be a pussy, and like that type of language used, like that is very derogatory towards femininity and towards women. And, like the idea that being a woman, being feminine is a bad thing. Like being collaborative and cooperative instead of competitive and without emotion is like that's kind of a big problem, that there is so much emphasis on, you know, that being feminine and being a girl is a bad thing, and that there is a hierarchy of, you know, what we might talk about, the toxic masculinities, that competitive, you know, aggressive, and often violent, you know, type of tendencies that are toxic masculinity. And not all masculinity is toxic. Not all of it. We're talking about a very specific type of masculinity that is very at the top of what is considered to be a man. You know, that those behaviors and those attitudes that are very much a hatred of anything that is feminine, and anything, like even gay men are seen as, you know, on low on the totem pole because they are seen as feminine, because they are also attracted to other men. They're seen as a threat. So a lot of, you know, homophobia, a lot of homophobia and transphobia is linked to misogyny as well, because it's a hatred of anything that is not masculine.
You know, and homophobia is an interesting thing. I mean, amongst the patriarchy to me, because it's like when men go, "What do you mean rape culture?" And then they're afraid of gay guys because they're going to get raped. So, you know, that has to say something to you about what we mean by rape culture, you know, because it's, you know, it is a part of how, you know, we talk to each other and how we date even, you know, I mean, it is, you know, and I definitely think that, yeah, a person takes a lot of practice, and women are used to test their oppression skills. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We are one of the lower rungs of society, and therefore we will have people like treating us as their property, because women were literally property up until the mid 1800s, right? I mean, so it makes sense we never talk about that in schools. We never talk about that even in women's history classes, really. Like, that's a reality that's just supposed to have evaporated into the ether, and we're supposed to have moved on completely and be a completely different culture now. But that's not how it is. And we have come from that history, and that history was there for a very, very long time. It's really ingrained in us. So, you know, like down to things like, you know, even as shit lib as like micro aggressions and like manspreading and like, you know, mansplaining and all that kind of stuff. You know, that has to do with the fact that we are pissed off that men feel they have ownership over our space. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's, you know, that's really also what we mean by rape culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of going through some of these. Never mm-hmm. talking about the most important aspect of being human is apocalyptic for society. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. Like, and whenever we talk about, let me bring up a couple more. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Optimism at the well. Although, of course, women can be just as detrimental to gay men, and gay men can be just as detrimental to women, and you know, we can definitely go into all that. But yeah, there has often been a lot of solidarity there.
Yes,
right. Although we should all, there is also a lot of animosity though, even between like gay men and lesbians, and like bisexuality is even still kind of seen as not a real thing. And of course, even a lot of hatred still of trans women and trans men. Like those are all issues that we really have to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I like what Lucky Burrito has to say here of like, as women, we need to be aware of stereotypes so we don't feed the stereotypes and continue adding to the problem. And you're absolutely right. That's what consciousness raising is really all about, is about unlearning sexism. And men need to undergo consciousness raising as well. Like, but women also, like, women have sexist thinking too. And we need to unlearn that sexist thinking if we're ever going to dismantle the structures that uphold patriarchy and sexism. Because very often when women do not go through consciousness raising and take up feminism without unlearning their sexist thinking, those are the liberal feminists that we're talking about, because they're the ones who are going to rise up the ranks and use feminism for their own self-promotion without, and basically, as Mary Barfoot said, they're dick sisters, that they are, you know, they're sisters of patriarchy. They want what man has got, but they're not, but they want it in the same way that man has gained it, which meaning that they're fine with patriarchy. They're fine with the sexist thinking. They're fine with it as long as they can have social mobility.
Yeah.
So if you are not undergoing consciousness raising and unlearning sexist thinking, then you are still a problem. You are not truly a feminist, because all you're doing is just using feminism for your own self-promotion and your own class mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're seeing a lot of that nowadays, unfortunately. Like it used to be kind of radical to be a feminist, right? And now it's like so Starbucks coffee house mainstream in some ways, even though we're still afraid of the word feminism, because that does invoke like the radical feminism of the 70s and the bra burning and the masculinity or whatever.
Just as what I was saying, like women, it's okay for women to take up masculinity because masculinity is good. But if men wear a skirt or a dress,
right?
Like if I'm sorry, if Harry Styles wants to wear a dress, let him wear a freaking dress. Who the heck cares?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely backwards.
This is still true. Like we see this in TV shows all the time. You know, the bumbling husband with a very capable, beautiful wife. Like do we really think? I'm sorry, but do we really believe that Kevin James will be able to get Leah Remini? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, actually, absolutely, and like that's a huge, something that's affected me. I feel like, because I've always been like the fat nerd growing up, and for a long time there would be guys that were interested in me but would never express it because they were afraid of being made fun of by their friends. Actually, there's a play about that. It's called Fat Pig by Neil LaBute. And it's pretty
intense. They're seen as puppy chasers, right? They have a fetish if they like fat women.
Well, yeah, that's how men like that are branded. But in this play, it kind of brings home that men are also bullied by their friends to date like hot women and stuff like that too. Like you're a woman and her hotness is part of your status as a man as well, right? So
definitely, Narissa. Very often, just like Sabby was saying, that is very much put on girls. Like, oh, you can't show too much skin because you might distract the boys from their education. I'm like, well, what about your education?
The only detentions I ever got in high school were because of dress code. It's true, and I got several. Detentions for it. Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
So real quick, let's talk a little bit about Gen Z and what Gen Z can really learn from because we kind of came into it, but now they're being really exposed to it. And I saw something interesting earlier today that said that Gen Z men, like I don't know how accurate this is, but that Gen Z men are starting to think that feminism has gone too far. It's making it harder for men to get jobs. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think firstly that there are studies showing that a lot of women have gone back to the home. A lot of women are getting crappier and crappier jobs. Like, so this, depression, what have you, is hitting us worse than it is dudes in general, intersectionally, of course. But yeah, I mean, that's completely ridiculous to me. And I think that, again, like the jobs that we get are extremely underpaid to begin with. And a lot of the times, we are like it is assumed that we have a male support system, right? Like if you're bargaining your paycheck, which is a lot of times not the case for a woman. Like I've tried to bargain my paycheck in a lot of my jobs and they've laughed at me most of the time. Like that's not, I've never successfully done it. Actually, now that I think about it, I've never successfully argued for more money ever, but I always try. But it's always assumed that I have a family member to take care of me or a husband, and like, why would I need more than the other girls? right? Like that was the argument when I was working in the office that I was talking about before. But they all had husbands or families that took care of them. And I am an orphan essentially, and I didn't. So.
Right. And it's often so assumed like that, we're only working, until, we can find a husband and have some kids. Like, so that will just, like, oh, you might have babies. So, we can't, give you that raise because, you might want to take time off or have kids someday. It's like, I mean, not this, like, okay, one, that's completely demeaning because one, you assume that I want to have kids. But also that if I did have kids, I still wouldn't be capable of doing the job properly.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a lot of, sexism on both sides there.
Yeah.
But it is kind of crazy. But whenever I hear that type of argument that like, oh, women are taking all the jobs, like, actually most of your jobs you're going, like manufacturing or whatever, they're going overseas.
Yeah.
They're being exported to other countries where, I mean, I guess women technically are taking your jobs, but very poor women in other countries who are being pennies on the dollar,
right,
to do that work.
Right. Like that, anytime somebody says somebody's taking my job or like that's what's happening, right? Nobody's taking your job. It's just that the people who are offering those jobs are attempting worse wage theft to others because they can, right? Like it's about, like, we have to, watch how we say things too. I think sometimes we need to really, remind ourselves like who's in charge here. Like I don't think, like, because they say that about immigrants too, right? Like what, I don't think that like, this green card worker or like not undocumented worker like came here and said, excuse me, do you have a white man's job I can take? No, they're fucking doing what they can to survive. And that's the case for women too, especially if they don't have men in their lives that are financially supporting them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not women who are taking your job, it's capitalism that's taking your job.
Yeah.
Or more accurately, neoliberalism that's taking your job.
Yes.
So,
Capital
be mad at the system,
yes.
not at, as Michael Brooks would say, be kind to people, be ruthless towards systems. Because it's not the women who are taking your job, it's capitalism that's taking your job. And
absolutely.
if you're really that concerned about having a job, how about fighting for a federal jobs guarantee?
That would be nice.
Ever think about that?
That would help out a lot of women too, because with a federal jobs guarantee would be childcare. So I mean that's a huge barrier to women right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean it's yeah. I don't know.
Thank you, Matt. That is such a nice thing for you to say. Yes. Thank you so much. That is really awesome of you to say. Thank you.
Rock on. We need male allies. Men can be feminists. Absolutely.
Yeah, because patriarchy is just as bad for you.
Absolutely.
Patriarchy is bad for all of us. And as I was saying earlier, capitalism is patriarchy. Capitalism is white supremacy. Capitalism is imperialism. So if we get rid of capitalism, we start to we don't get rid of all of those problems, but we can start to really, if we can get capitalism out of the way in that competitiveness and start really working together, then we can start really starting to edge out a lot of those other problems like sexism and racism and so on and so forth. Like people, like, again, getting rid of capitalism will not make those problems go away on its own. We do have to dismantle all those systems together. We have to get rid of white supremacy. We have to start unlearning white supremacist thinking. And what I said earlier, Western supremacist thinking. Yes. We have to get rid of all of that. We have to get rid of sexist thinking.
Right.
So let me look at a few more of these. Bomb Hill, Sabby had to leave at 8 o'clock. So unfortunately, she had to leave a little early.
What are
But
we,
she
chopped
was
liver?
here and she was awesome. She was here and she was awesome.
She was awesome. She's always awesome.
So basic notes, my regular slot is Thursdays at 7. Sometimes I go on Tuesdays at 7 as well. But this is my regular slot, Thursdays at 7. So you can find the Killjoy Guide on FHL right here on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
It's a great show.
Automation. Yes, automation has also stolen the jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Will continue to steal the jobs.
Yeah. But you know, one of the things I was talking about with Laura Fielding actually is that, you know, everything that we have that we don't consider to be handmade is handmade, right?
Mhm.
So like when we're talking about things that are automated machines, like we're also seeing like factories full of people with sewing machines too. Like that still exists. It's just that it exists overseas now. And that's and if you're talking about like, you know, traditionally female skills and how it, you know, when I was growing up, I was taught how to sew and crochet and, you know, do my makeup and stuff like that. These are professions that are not only paid poorly, but they're also paid poorly because a lot of that is outsourced. We like female culture, the jobs associated with female culture have been some of the worst victims for outsourcing. I mean, that's, you know, anybody who has an independent craft business, anybody who has, you know, like a fashion, anything fashion related, or even if you make like drapes, you're still competing with people who take pennies to the dollar in another country. Always. And that cuts us deep because, you know, women who had families back in the turn of the century used to be able to make a lot of money from home, taking in sewing and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And now that's no longer an option.
Sorry, just looking at a lot of these different ones. This is a good point. Like there are a lot of job sharing. Job sharing is definitely a good idea. I agree with that. Yeah, but this is a good point that this did happen in right after World War II. That, and there's a great book about this called "The Way We Never Were," about the fake nostalgia that we have over the 1950s and the post-war period, about how it wasn't, you know, this, you know, the "Make America Great Again," like that kind of nostalgia. Like it wasn't the time period that we really know it to be. And one of the things that I said was basically what optimism of the will is saying here is that many of the women, including, you know, the Rosies, were forced to leave the workplace because it was their duty to go back home and let the men have their jobs back. And so a lot of women were forced to go back into the workplace. And that's one of the reasons why they created, you know, the that kind of domestic housewife persona. Like there was actually during the 40s a lot of women journalists who were involved in, you know, different works that they were then replaced after World War II by men who it was the men and the male marketers who were the ones who came up with the domestic housewife in order to convince women to go back home, because it was their duty to be at home, to wait on their husbands after they came home from a long day of work. Like the nuclear family as we know it, the American nuclear family, didn't exist until after World War II. And it was for this very reason, was to force women out of the workplace and back into the home. And of course, this was, you know, more middle-class women, lower-class women, and women of color. They, as Optimism of the Will said, they had nowhere to go because they were always working. They had to work because they had to have those two incomes in order to get by. So women of color, they didn't recede back into the workplace. They kept working. It was only middle class women who were the ones sent back to work or sent back home.
Yep, that's an excellent point.
And even a lot of the myth too about, you know, the fact that, you know, women went into the workplace during the 60s and the 70s because, they wanted to go back to work. That also some of the times wasn't true. Like a lot of women, started working for like companies like Avon and Mary Kay and like Tupperware because, they did want, like something to get them out of the house.
Mhm.
But it was also true, though, that a lot of them were forced to go to work because they had to keep up with the consumerism that, the keeping up with the Joneses, whenever you hear that, that's where that came from. And why women a lot of times had to go back into the workforce because they had to keep up with the Joneses. They had to, keep up that middle class lifestyle. And that became more and more expensive as time went on. So they had to keep up that consumerist lifestyle.
So like when you say somebody's jonesing for something, that's what it comes from?
Well, I don't know about that, but but the idea of like even keeping up with the Kardashians or whatever, like that idea that, we must keep up. We had to keep consuming and, make it appear like we're richer and richer than we actually are.
Yeah.
Like we have to have, the new state-of-the-art refrigerator. We had to have the new state-of-the-art vacuum cleaner. You had the ranch house in the suburbs, all these different things, like these symbols of American exceptionalism,
Yeah.
and American success, the American dream,
Right.
So, yeah, a lot of this stuff came out of the 1950s because it was all this facade of, the nuclear family is the heart of capitalism. But we don't realize that the heart of capitalism, that nuclear family, is very atomistic and makes us so that we are individualized and we're not connecting with our communities. Because we have to have the nuclear family. It's no longer a village that raises the kids. It's that nuclear family. And the woman, the wife, is what keeps all of that intact. Without the wife, you have no home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you hear a lot of, those different elements like, happy wife, happy life. Because if you didn't have your wife, you had no household.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of that is where that came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Because the American dream is a dream off the backs of everybody else, right? It's only a dream for the American white man, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Reading.
Oh, that's horrifying. There's a lot
keep
of
an eye on what's
creepy
in
stuff
your
in
makeup
cosmetics.
products, ladies.
There's a lot of creepy stuff in cosmetics. Actually, that's always been true. Did you know that back in Egypt, I believe that they used crocodile dung as eyeshadow? I can't remember if it was eyeshadow or nail polish. I can't remember. I guess it depends on how crocodile dung dries, but there's always creepy stuff. Yeah.
Let's see. 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, $62,400 a year. Yeah. And what's so sad about that is, we still don't have a living wage. Like you can't, in order to afford, I know I saw this meme not too long ago. Like an average 1-bedroom apartment, I believe, is like $1,400 a month. And they say that your rent should be no more than a quarter of your monthly income. So that means that you have to make $32 an hour in order to afford the average 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, that's not the case for most people.
It's so silly. Like minimum wage is $7.25.
Yeah.
It's insane. Yeah. And guess who's working most of those jobs?
Right.
Women.
Exactly. Women and people of color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, my rent is I'm pretty sure it's like 48% of my paycheck.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I was reading, like during Soviet Russia, they actually made it so that rent could not be more than like 4% of your income.
Oh my God. Can we have that here, please?
Right.
That would be very nice.
Oh. I don't even know. I clicked on that by accident. I don't know. What of a man saying? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Danny, I think it is Iceland. I think it was Iceland that put in the 4-day work week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Also,
you're right.
our working class has never been able to survive on one income, especially as Black men were increasingly incarcerated. It was totally down to the women, and it still is. It still is. Very nice, girl gamer. Yeah, I want the village back too. All right, Bess has to step away for just a minute, so let me address some of these comments before we have to start wrapping up soon. This is, I love this point, Lucky, because I can actually address this because it's funny. Like we do need community aid and like life skills, like how to sew, change a tire, oil, basic cooking. It is so funny because a lot of millennials are taking, adulting classes and are being made fun of for doing that. And what I find so ridiculous about that, like, I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you from my experience, both my parents are nurses. So we were never, well off, but, we got by. But both of my parents had to work full-time jobs. My mom wanted to stay home or work part-time, but she couldn't because we needed the money. So both my parents worked full-time. Very often they worked overtime. And so my parents never had the time to teach any of us, those basic life skills. And a lot of us had to, yes, thanks, Sabby. A lot of us had to learn a lot of those skills either on our own or we didn't learn them. Like I didn't, I can cook now, but I never learned to cook growing up. I never learned how to sew. I never, it wasn't until maybe I was in college that I learned how to, check my tires and my oil and all that stuff. But no, we aren't taught a lot of those basic life skills. Even why didn't they not teach you how to do your taxes in high school? Why is that not a life skill that they teach? That's something I'm really curious about. And I'm seeing fewer and fewer home ec classes too. I don't know about you guys. I see fewer and fewer home ec classes in school. I mean, we don't even teach sex ed in school, which is a whole other topic and that I really want to talk about another day. Because sex ed is very important to me. But it's just that's something that none of my parents never taught us any of those things because they were constantly working. And even when they got off work, because none of us knew how to cook, and my parents were too tired to cook when they got home. Very often there's okay, order pizza or get fast food. And I don't know about you guys, about what your experiences were like, but that's kind of what my experience was, that nobody had time to teach us those types of skills. So we didn't learn them. So I'm not surprised that millennials are learning a lot of these basic life skills like sewing and cooking and things like that by going to adulting classes. It's hey, instead of getting mad or laughing at millennials for having to take adulting classes because we didn't learn basic life skills growing up, how about you get mad at the system for forcing our parents to work and not teaching us those skills? How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Bess, have you ever taken an adulting class?
I have not. I probably need one though. Yeah.
So what was that like for you? Like, were you taught basic life skills growing up? Like how to cook, how to sew?
Yeah, I was taught how to sew. My mom knew how to sew, and I was like always crafty, so I'm good at that. I'm not great at cooking. I don't think my mom taught me how to cook too much, but like I knew the basics. But yeah, no, as far as like how to pay bills and balance your checkbook and all that hoo-ha, I never learned that. That's for sure. And you know, I definitely think that, you know,
yeah, this was a reaction to, since you weren't here when I was reacting
sure.
to it. I think we need community aid in life skills, how to sew, change a tire, oil, no basic cooking, gardening. Like, I want to learn how to garden so much, fishing, all the things we know that we can share and learn.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with that. Because those are definitely things I did not learn because both of my parents work full time.
Right. Because I think too, it's like, you know, capitalism has progressed to a point where you are supposed to dedicate your life to the corporation. Like even amongst your nuclear family, it's all supposed to be for the corporation. So, you know, like we like, you know, so like we are, you know, expected to like go out for food. We're expected to like go to a seamstress for you know, tailoring our clothes or whatever. And it's, you know, it's like getting to the point where I think, you know, like liberal feminism is asking us to do that even more and more, you know. But I think the answer is really the opposite. I think the answer is really for us to do as much as we can for ourselves so that we don't have to rely on corporations to do it for us, right? But I mean, but if you think about it, there's whole, you know, like Hungry Man dinners, or like, you know, like there's whole industries like based off of like people's need to not be doing the things that women used to traditionally do back in like agricultural times. Or, you know, I mean, not that there isn't agriculture these days, but there was, you know, a specific, you know, up until a certain point, up until the Industrial Revolution, we were arguably an agrarian society primarily, right? So.
All right, so there's a few more comments, and we're gonna have to wrap up here in a minute. So I am blessed to grow up in a keep fixing it. It's not totaled. Oh yeah. Yeah, you're lucky. Though they're making it harder and harder even to buy your own parts to your car and fix it yourself. They're making it more and more difficult. One of the things I love about traveling with the Rainbow family back in the day, living Renaissance fair. That sounds awesome.
That sounds amazing.
That does sound awesome.
We want to hang out with you.
I always wanted to learn how to sew, but I always hear negative connotation that one apparently reaps what they sew. That's cute. That's cute. That's cute. Oh, this is a good one. Yeah, social conditioning of learned helplessness.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good point. Like, I feel like Gen Xers, they were left on their own so much that, you know, they just were like, okay, we're just going to adapt. We're just going to find our way.
Yeah, that's something Jackie said to me actually on my show too. And, you know, I feel like that's the case a little bit with millennials.
Whereas we had helicopter parents.
Like we were taught how to learn stuff, right? But we were guided by parents and teachers doing that, I guess. Maybe it's the difference.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so funny too. Like they wonder how you know, why so many millennials, you know, have to move back home. One is because we can't afford to live on our own. We just can't. Yeah. A lot of us can't. And also a lot of us weren't taught basic life skills. And that's the truth. Like particularly like there's a big difference between what you see on television. Like there's a meme that I saw on Twitter that was like, you know, millennials on TV, like, oh my God, I have to go get my Pups Good Spice Latte. TTYL, bye-bye. Or it's millennials in real life. capitalism sucks and the world is burning and we have to dismantle the corporate system. That's millennials. I mean, there are definitely some that are more, the self-indulgent millennials who, want instant gratification. There are those that exist, but they're very much elitist. And, it's the people who have trust funds who just, they don't know how to survive on their own because they were never expected to.
Right. Well, I feel like our generation gets a bad rap because we were never able to have like a subculture in the way that previous generations have. Like the Gen Xers have like punk and they have funk and they have, the boomers have like hippies and disco, right? Like that's
and hipsters.
Right. But if you think about what a hipster is, it's somebody who doesn't want to identify as a hipster. Right. And you would say that for millennials, too. Millennials don't like to identify as millennials because the only thing that we know about millennials are told to us in the news. Right. Like the 24-hour news cycle has focused on the people around them, which are their privileged kids. And then that perception of a millennial gets published, whereas the rest of us were too, busy trying to survive to be able to create zines and distribute them, to assemble together and have, consciousness raising meetings or what the shit, because we're juggling 3 jobs just to keep an apartment or get one eventually. Right. Like, I mean, we didn't have, the only space that we had to create a culture for ourselves was online. And because of that, it also, I think, gave people who were looking for stories like that a very one-sided window into our cultures as well, right? I like to joke that like I don't know anybody who like seriously ate avocado toast, right? Like it's like avocados are A, really expensive up here in New Jersey, and B, if I was going to eat avocados because they were cheap, because I'm assuming that's where avocado toast comes from. It's like, like less expensive than a real breakfast or something. I don't understand. Maybe because we're healthy. I don't know. But
all right. Okay. So I'm gonna cut you off. Sorry, okay. I don't want to cut you off because we are running out of time, and Nick has a live stream right after this.
Oh, sure.
So I'm gonna cut you off real quick. So before we have to wrap up, very quickly, tell the people where they can find you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I am at Millensplaining. All right. Here on Twitter, I am Millensplaining.com. You can find all my links there. I have a YouTube channel, I have a podcast, and I would really appreciate it if you all would like to donate. I'm trying to get started here, and I'm always behind on my rent, and I really, really, really could use your help with that. And I believe the link for that is also at Millensplaining.com. So thanks so much, everybody. It was really great to be here.
Yay, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so you guys know where to find me. You know where to find me on Nerdolitics. You know to find me here at the Killjoy Guide and also on Fred Hampton Left Round Table. All right, and if you watched the talk earlier, the round table earlier, you already know what all those stuff I have coming up. So just go to that video and look that up there. All right, guys. All right, we are out of time. Yes. All right, guys, we are all out of time. This has been a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Bess. I really appreciate it. And also shout out to Sabby for coming on and talking to us. And this has been the Killjoy Guide, the Left Feminist podcast for the 99%. I am your host, Killjoy Meg, and we will see you Killjoys next time. Bye. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another video. See you Killjoys next time.